Peter Drucker once said, "The best way to predict the future is to create it." The 2030 Agenda is more than vision. It is a commitment to inclusive growth. Climate shocks disrupt livelihoods. Urbanization strains systems. Inequality tests stability. Green energy, digital access, and resilient transport can expand opportunity if implementation keeps pace. The challenge is no longer ambition, it is delivery. Welcome to the panel, Accelerating the 2030 Agenda, Inclusive Growth and Sustainable Connectivity.
Welcome to the last session of today. We have an illustrious round of honorable guests. I do not introduce them one by one because you all have read the program 5 times at least today. So you will hear from them how they are looking at the subject we were asked to discuss. About 20 years ago, I attended a Sustainable Development Conference in Mozambique, and the president of the World Bank, then Jim Wolfensohn, and the Dutch minister Jan Pronk stood on the scene. And they opened the jacket, and it was written, "We need action." So I stood up and asked for the floor. And I told them, "Mr. President, Mr. Minister, we don't need action, we need results. Accelerating is not enough, results." So I hope we all will discuss how can we achieve better results, more results in a given time, maybe with less means, maybe with more means. But to introduce, I am sure that our Nobel laureate will refer to the very principle, and that is we have to deal with human beings. We have to look at their well-being and not just at expert opinion. So you have the floor.
Thank you. Thank you. Friends, our world is burning. Humanity and planet both are in danger. And the paradox is that we live in a world of abundance, yet hunger persists. We live in a world of hyperconnectivity. But can we say with honesty that we have connectedness in individuals, communities, and countries which is genuine and mutually responsible? A world which is running fast than ever before, yet billions of people, especially children and women, are left out and left behind. So it's very difficult for me to talk on how to ensure sustainability and inclusion, because these advices, these suggestions, these policies do exist in the world. And there are hundreds and thousands of conferences and meetings and discussions take place inside the parliaments, inside the United Nations buildings, and outside also. Because these situations which we are facing today are not natural nor divine curse. They are all man-made. They are conspicuous deliberate, and systematic. What is the problem? Where is the missing link? The biggest missing link is the sense of moral responsibility, the sense of moral accountability, the sense of moral compass in our personal and social and political life. We know the solutions and we know the problems. But again, there is a serious gap, there is a serious disconnect between these two problems and solutions. It's important to discuss about inclusive growth, sustainable communications, digital connect, and all these things. But we are connected with real time. Look at the world today. If we are really connected, if we are really responsible, if we are really accountable, then why so many problems exist, especially with the children? When India got freedom, I would like to remind, and that is universal thing, the first Prime Minister of India have met Mahatma Gandhi, the father of nation, a saint of our times, and asked him, "Sir, now India is free and I'm going to make new policies. Please bless and advise me." And Gandhi said, "Nehru, I'm going to give you a talisman. When you make any policy, then think of the last person of society, the poorest of the poor you have ever seen or ever met, and assess whether your policies, your programs, your schemes, your laws, and all your politics is bringing a sense of happiness, the smile on the face of that last person of society." That talisman equally works now. When we are talking of earth, you are aware that 1% of the richest of the world emit, in last 25 years, emitted the amount of carbon dioxide which is more than the rest half of the poorest of the people of the world. In last 100 years, just one country, Britain, has emitted more more carbon dioxide than the cumulative emission in all 54 African countries. And today, what is happening? As yesterday morning, Dr. Tedros said that the world is spending $2.7 trillion annually on military. That is 30 times more than what is needed to end hunger. There's another figure that this is also 30 times more than what the world needs to educate all children in the world and give quality education under the SDG 4. But it continues. 250 million children are out of school today. 138 million children are working at the cost of their childhood education and freedom to produce wealth for others. And 473 million children are living in those situations of war and insurgencies. They are facing trauma every single day. And that trauma will remain forever. They are listening, bombs and drones and all these things. We all know that thousands of children have been assassinated, have been killed in Gaza. The latest example is that 168 girls, small, young girls, were killed in Iran. Children are not responsible for wars. Children are not responsible for any kind of global warming. Children are not responsible for the situations which the world are facing, but they are the worst sufferers and worst victims of that what we have created and we are continue to create. This is the situation. So we have to rethink how to build a sense of moral responsibility and accountability. How we have to find a way out to build the leadership that is driven on that. And that requires a deeper sense of compassion. Compassion not as a soft emotion. Compassion is not as a mercy, pity, kindness, which has been taught for years and ages. I am talking here the compassion as force. The force which is dynamic, disruptive, and transformative. And that is needed today. Thank you.
And we will certainly come back on that notion of compassion, but we have a minister from Egypt, and she certainly is not short of leadership, all in contrary. Leadership is there. Are the means available for you to address the issues?
Well, thank you very much, and it's a pleasure to be here and have these frank, open discussions with a great deal of experience from all participants. A few things come to mind, and I think that a key objective from Baku Global Forum is to walk out of these halls with a more commitment to doing more international cooperation. I think this is the spirit that I hope all of us will work on in our different areas. And I start with this because I believe that the only way for all of us to be able to bring or make the gaps much less is through cooperating with one another. But that has several conditions. First, country ownership is extremely important. Countries need to identify very clearly what priorities are. Professor talked about children, women, education, health. All of these are important national priorities. And when countries are setting these priorities in a global context, there's a word that is always used by the United Nations and also in the development committee meetings of the World Bank, which are global public goods. When India is spending on its education, on its health, it is providing a global public good. When Egypt is spending on education, on health, on inclusion, this is also a global public good. So we need to identify the human elements of development as global public goods. This will lead me to the next step, which is the financing. But in terms of country priorities at any point in time, identified by countries through well-functioning institutions. The second point, and when in 2015 SDGs were announced at the UN, they were supposed to be the common denominator that brought all of us together to say no hunger, no poverty, more partnerships, better peace, and so forth. So this is a very important context. First, setting the priorities. Number two, identifying these priorities as much as possible as global public goods, because all of us need to identify how collectively we will be able to push forward. The third point, I'm a macroeconomist by practice and by education. It is very difficult for any country to draw in investments to increase its local resources in order to spend unless it has macroeconomic stability. So macroeconomic stability is a necessary condition to be able to push forward all the development areas that we want to do. But macroeconomic stability is not enough. It's necessary but not sufficient. What brings sufficiency is the continuous reforms that take place in order to bring in investments and private capital, which was also discussed in the previous panel. Macroeconomic stability is necessary, important, but since 2015 till today, we have not lived in a tranquil time. Each and every point in time, whether it's the COVID, whether it's the war in Russia, Ukraine, whether it's what we're seeing today, each and every few years there's a shock that pushes us away from tranquility and hence jeopardizes macroeconomic stability in emerging economies, which need to spend on education, which need to spend on health, which need to spend on inclusion. So there need to be ways to increase the buffers so that when we are hit with a shock, we are not interrupting the path towards development. So macroeconomic stability. Second, identifying priorities and explaining them as global public goods. Yeah. Then comes the third point, which is financing. And with heightened risks today in the global environment, as we see, and these are always coming at moments with compounded risks. So we first had inflation, interest rates, now with oil prices going up. All of this increases risks of financing and private sector incentives into emerging economies. So again, tightening very much the budgets for emerging economies. And now is the time for more cooperation through multilateral development banks. And I started my discussion with global public goods because today mutual reliance between multilateral development banks is more needed than ever. World Bank, EBRD, EIB, others working together to be able to encourage private sector development, private sector investments in emerging economies so that we are able to meet and try and close the gap when it comes to what I identified initially as global public goods. So this is just at the outset how I would like to frame the issue. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Is in your endeavor also a kind of a systematic approach to look into the bankability of the poor or of the people? We see in a lot of societies a huge percentage of people who are not able to get the credit because their values they have at home, being cows or others, they are not validated in the sense that they can borrow money and they can start their own business. I experienced that in a number of countries. Maybe you can come back on that issue from a systemic point of view. The second is, sometimes I hear that in the UN, the discussion on global public goods is stuck, but the local public goods is very much in demand. So maybe you could also come back on that issue. Thank you. Zlatko, professor, former president, ambassador. 5 minutes, please.
Thank you, Walter. Of course, I, like every good student, I mean, since I learned from Ismail that after being professor for so many years, you have to become student again if you want to really have enjoying your life. So I prepared myself, but then after your reflections, I heard Kailash and Rania, I just want to reflect something based on what I was thinking about anyway. We had excellent examples and perfect figures. We heard your introductory words that we have to move from the words and thoughts to deeds. But in order to mobilize people, move people, you have to measure where they are. So I'll talk about something which is very, very low level of maybe ideas. How do we measure where we are? Because the topic of our panel is accelerating SDG 2030 agenda. So we want to talk about how to accelerate. Now, accelerate what? To get the 2030 agenda goals, right? There's a SDG report that's been produced for 10 years, more than 10 years, which is saying actually how far we went. So if you take that report, you see that about 1/3 of the targets are on a way to be met, 1/3 are even going into regression, and about 1/3 we are comme ci, comme ça, we are nowhere, we are where we are. So if you want to put it this way, 1/3 we are close to the goal, 2/3 we are not, and even we are going in reverse. So let's assume that we are planning that in this 15 years, we will be riding on a highway with designed goal over there in the other 3 years. And if we are on a third, of that pathway, it means that, let's say, if we needed 60 miles per hour to drive to good driver, relax, nice highway, it means that instead of being close to 180 miles, how the goal was far, if we were planning to go 60 miles per hour, it looks like after 2 years, we were driving 20 miles per hour. So we cannot keep driving with 60 miles per hour. We have to speed up to 140 miles per hour. Can we do it physically? Do we have highway that can do that? Do we have machine that can take that? What I'm trying to say is, at least we know where we are, which is good thing. We are third away from the goal. Last year, there was something which we discussed in the Global Tobacco Forum a year before, Pact for the Future. Pact for the Future, someone was saying that's a turbocharger for SDGs. Or maybe we can say that Pact of the Future, if we see how we are going along the Pact of the Future, it's some kind of stress test for the SDGs. So, but do we measure where are we with Path for the Future? No, we don't. We have no clue. Of course, we have some very, very rudimental statistics about it. My suggestion is that we have to, let's say, the things that we discussed about where to go, what to do, we have to have stable mechanism of measuring them. Is it academic? Is it multilateral organizations? Is it donors who are interested in it? But we have to do something in order to measure it so we can mobilize people. Otherwise, if we say we are good, we are doing well, we are just another people with opinion. If we are philosophers, if we are artists, we can beat that without data. But I mean, you cannot accelerate to SDGs 2030 without the data. And my last point, where we are. On average, globally, SDGs are far off track, point number one. Point number two, East and South Asia has outperformed all other regions in SDGs progress since 2015. Everyone is not driving the same speed. Other countries, they have progressed more rapidly than the peers, including, for example, Benin in Sub-Sahara, Nepal in East Asia, those are good examples. Peru, United Arab Emirates, Uzbekistan, Costa Rica, they are doing better than others. So it is possible to do something. Point number three, European countries, top of the SDGs, which is not surprising, but they're even far away. They are still driving not even close to 60 miles per hour, which their highway definitely and the machine allows them. Barbados ranks first, and the United States ranks the last in UN-based multilateralism. What a surprise, right? I mean, and this is from the last year result. I mean, there's no worse than being lost. You can be lost more than lost. But I mean, definitely there will be, maybe Barbados will not be the first, but we know who will be the last one when it comes to multilateralism. For many developing countries, the lack of fiscal space is more major obstacle to SDGs. That's not, I didn't invent the wheel. And finally, sustainable development offers high returns. Capital should flow to emerging and developing countries on more favorable terms. That is not the case now. I'll stop in here. Good? Thank you.
We certainly all agree that it is important to look into progress. But sometimes I have the impression that it is a little bit the beauty contest of self-declarations. Or you have an army of experts running behind those who should bring the difference. But I learned from the first Rio local values and so-called development goals, we asked them in '91, that they are in a way or another like a fixed star in heaven, where we can find orientation where to go and then to measure our progress.
Let's make it dynamic, Walter.
Yeah.
I don't want to look like a boring engineer, computer scientist who is talking about numbers.
Okay.
I know the statistic is not about how many of us are alive. Statistics is about how do we live.
Yes.
So I mean, statistics can give it misleading. 1 billion of the people live in planets just like us, who have everything that we need. 7 billion people either don't have food or social security or healthcare and so on and so on. So statistics says a lot of things. 6 billion people have a mobile phone and access to internet, which is great. So statistically speaking, we are very developed, right? Of course, 2 billion people don't have anything to cook on, but that's another story. So statistically, they say a lot of things. I'm not going to be obsessed with the numbers, but I'm saying that it's good to run the numbers.
And let's hope that the statistics
Am I okay,
are taken in an independent way.
Okay.
In my country, we have the saying, the national bank must be independent, statistics must be independent, justice must be independent.
It will be okay for us to be all
Okay.
Switzerland, that's okay.
So we come to the Prime Minister from Czechia, Mr. Jiri Rusnok, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Thank you very much for inviting me to this excellent forum. Congratulations to organizers. In this not easy time, it's a really impressive achievement, also from logistics point of view, I must say. So, congratulations. Yes, first of all, I am not an expert in environmental and social issues. My background is similar like Mrs. Minister to macroeconomics, central bank, and so on. So I will be maybe a bit more general. And I would start with the general environment circumstances of the situation, which was mentioned over here many times already, and which is absolutely important that also for this issue is the state of the world. I would call it mainly the fragmentation. It seems to me it's the best word to describe, because it seems to me that there is a few layers of this fragmentation, and all of these layers are somehow interconnected, and this interconnection is making the situation even worse and more complex. Of course, it's a global level. We can observe already for years kind of de-globalization, the fragmentation of broader trade cooperation and so on. But we see also the fragmentation on the regional levels. In some cases, unfortunately, it's also the case of Europe, which is, of course, from my perspective, the most important. We see in the European Union the growing tensions amongst the members in different layers. We, of course, also can observe some fragmentation inside the member states, inside each countries. More and more, let's say, populist and nationalist-oriented parties, political movements are taking the fore in these countries, which is also, of course, pushing further and complicate the achievement of the consensus or the road to the consensus in such organizations like European Union. In some aspect, of course, we can observe the fragmentation even in the communities and even in the individual lives, but this is other topic, not for this panel. But what is important from this is that as a result of that not very positive development, also the macroeconomic development, macroeconomic stability, which was also already mentioned before by Mrs. Minister, as one of the most important assumptions for positive development, is not the best shape, including the most developed countries. If you observe the Europe, in fact, most of the European Union members have a stagnating economy already for years. Of course, there are some exceptions, few exceptions, maybe some Scandinavian countries, Poland, maybe some others, but the biggest countries like Germany, France, Italy, and many others, they unfortunately went through stagnation. There is some way increasing social tensions in many countries, which also contributed to the political changes which we are observing. So from this perspective, really the circumstances are not very positive, also looking at the development goals and development needs from the global perspective. So it seems to me that nevertheless there are still some important area for activity for each countries and even each communities, because the world is more and more unsecure. It seems to me that two words are key for the future thinking about solving of all of these important problems. The first one is resilience, and the second one is adaptation or adaptability. So I find this as more and more important also for the future, looking to the possibilities of global solidarity. It seems to me that building up resilience from this very base, let's say, levels, starting with communities, starting with regions, national states, and mainly as such as important areas like independence of energy resources, interconnection, smart grids of these independent resources. So energy and self-sufficiency at this, I find this very important. The same area, or very much important area, is digital connectivity, which can also bring up a lot of results also in development goals. And all of this is somehow frameworked by need for education. Education is a goal, it's a basic assumption to be able to effectively achieve even on these specific basic levels necessary goals. So let me stop now here, and I'm looking forward for the discussion.
Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. You, of course, mentioned an extremely important issue, solidarity. What is your experience? Is it rather a mechanical solidarity, taking the hand, going to the portemonnaie, or is it still a matter of inner value? I mean, in Europe, we have in a number of countries a change in the so-called culture of memories, not eager to look what happened in the past, but rather to live in a present world. How do you see that in your country?
You're right that all of these issues are in certain dynamic development or discussion, and it's on one side it's still the, I would say, legitimate part of the political battle between those who are more in favor of the redistribution, I mean, the solidarity on the national level, including maybe also the regional level, being the member of the European Union. On the other hand, it's still the, I would say, primary, and basically it's still the value in which the people believe, or which they are trying to live through. And it seems to me both of these approaches are going parallel somehow. From perspective of my country, I still feel that people are very much engaged in this way. You know, I can give you some small example. In fact, my country has hosted the most refugees from Ukraine per capita at the moment. Yeah? So it's something which was not commanded by the government. It's much more spontaneous by society, and it's important for us. So it's very difficult to say that. Definitely it's changing, yeah, but still it seems to me that the basic values are very important.
You allude, of course, to a very important issue because in a lot of so-called donor countries, the expenditures on migration or illegal migration is reduced from the so-called overall budget, which is, as such, a big mistake these countries undergo and are not able yet to solve it and to create transparency. We come to our guest from China. He has particular knowledge in South-South cooperation. What do you say about your experience regarding the SDGs?
Okay, thank you very much, Chairman. I'd like to make 4 points relating to the theme of the panel. The first one, we are far behind the agenda for the SDGs. And no matter how we accelerate the progress, unlikely we will be able to accomplish the goals by the time of 2030. However, all those 17 goals are desirable for humanity. So even we know we will not be able to achieve them, we should try our best to make the progress. On the one hand, on the other hand, if we cannot accomplish those 17 goals by 2030, we should have another one or similar initiative because for the humanity, we need them. That's my first point. My second point, we need to learn some lessons. If next one, we have these opportunities. And so we have 17 goals, but from what I see, the foundation to achieve all those 17 goals are goal 8, decent jobs. Because if people have decent jobs, they will not be poor. They can get rid of poverty. If they have decent jobs, they will have income, so they will be able to buy food, and there will be no hunger. That's goal 2. And if they have decent job with decent income, if they are sick, they can go to see doctors, so they can get health, and so on. So decent job should be the foundation. But if we travel to the low-income country, they are poor, and they are working. So that means that actually, all the peoples, they have job today, but they cannot have sufficient income, only because their jobs are not decent. So that comes into the issue, how to provide decent job to the people. And that related to the goal 9, innovation, industrialization, and infrastructure. We need to have modern technology to transform traditional agriculture. Because the majority of the poor people today working in agriculture, they can have sufficient income only because their productivity level are too low. And so they need to have innovation, modern technology. But we also know only agriculture cannot transform the country. To raise the income continuously, to meet the expectation of the people. So we need to have industrialization, move people from agriculture, even if it's modern, to industries, and move up industrial ladders. But if we want to adopt modern technology in agriculture, if we want to have industrializations, we need to have infrastructure. Because without irrigation, you cannot adopt modern technology in agriculture. Without power, electricity, port, network, road network, and so on, that makes it impossible to have industrialization. So goal 9, innovation, industrialization, infrastructure is the way to deliver goal 8, decent job. That is my second point. My third point is that if we want to have innovation, industrialization, and infrastructure, certainly we need to have a market system, provide the incentive for the entrepreneur, and also allow them to have a free entry to the market and allow market to allocate resources. So market institution is very important. But the state is also very important because if you want to have a technological innovation, you need to improve the infrastructure. And the infrastructures cannot be addressed by market itself. You need to have a state to work with the private sectors to help them to remove all those bottlenecks. Certainly, it would also be desirable to provide incentive for the first mover and so on. And to that extent, because the resources of the government is limited, they need to prioritize the use of the limited resources and implementation capacity to release the bottleneck for the technological innovation and industrialization, so that the state also need to use industrial policy in a smart way. But how to use smart industrialization to improve infrastructure and so on, we need to have new theories. And so theoretical innovation in the social sciences and to allow the market and the state to work organically to make the modernization, industrialization feasible in the country would be essential for us to achieve development agenda like 2030s. And last one is equally important or even more important. All this kind of program initiative can function only in a peaceful environment. But unfortunately, we see so many wars in so many places today. And if a country or if a region is hit by war, then all kind of development program will not be feasible. They are going to lag it behind. So we need to learn a lesson. We need to have a wisdom. In war, everyone is a loser, no matter which side you belong to. And the way to address the conflicts should rely on diplomatic way, by dialogue, by negotiation, by way to find a common ground, and so we can address the conflicts, and so we can have peace, and with peace, then development would be possible. So let me stop here.
Your elusive presentations, you mentioned the keyword, of course, innovation, and we might come back on that, whether there are new ways to consider in speeding up the application of those goals and to go for better results. But we have with Cyril Kaburici, the former Prime Minister from Moldavia, one of the smaller countries in Europe, but I am sure you have your own experiences how you follow this and implement these development goals. Please, Cyril.
Thank you, Chairman. Hello, everyone. We were talking now about the pressure that is finding today the world. So we are living under this pressure, and already the climate change or the climate shocks or the food insecurity, water insecurity, the decrease of trust into international institutions, it's not already the reality, or it's not already the future risk, it is the reality of today. The issue is that based on these realities of today, the economical development is shaped, and also the political stability is shaped. Talking about the 2030 agenda, within this situation, I would say that the agenda is not only about the development, but it is about the human security. In the last 50, 70 years, we had a tremendous development. We had developments in terms of technologies, in terms of infrastructure, in terms of innovations. We were mentioning today about them. All these created very powerful tools for the humanity. With these tools, we started to create solutions like clean energy systems, access to the digital infrastructure, and also access to data and monitoring systems. So these are the tools that are supposed, and they are helping the societies. With these tools, the societies are becoming more resilient and more inclusive by using these tools. But the infrastructure alone is not enough. The connectivity must reduce the vulnerability, and also the connectivity must reduce the inequality. And here I would like to give the example about my country. So I'm coming from a small country, Moldova. We know this not from the theory, but we pass through. So for us, the resilience depends on the integration and not on isolation. To be mentioned that we are one of the countries that all our history we were dependent from the energy point of view only from one source. It was very tough, but with a huge effort from the government, and all of us, we understood this, we took some actions. Actions were related to interconnecting the country with our neighboring countries. We became a part of the European grid operator system, so-called NSOE, and we managed to create good conditions for investors to come and invest in energy sector. As results, we became stronger and more independent from the energy point of view. We reduced basically to zero the dependency, so we don't depend from that point that I was mentioning before. And with all these investments, we supported the economical development, or the economical growth, I would say. The most important lesson we have learned is when the cooperation is based on trust, and the cooperation is based on very clear rules, then we can increase the stability. Accelerating the 2030 agenda, I would mention three things that, according to me, are essential. This is connectivity that must serve people. It has to create opportunities for people and not dependency. Innovation, it was mentioned before, I support this. Innovation is something that must be shared. Not only few countries should benefit of it, but all of us. And sustainability, that whatever projects we put on the table, it has to make economical sense. As Prime Minister Rusnok has mentioned, that today world is tempted by fragmentation. Fragmentation is something that increases the risks and also slows down the progress. What we need in this situation, we need cooperation, we need trust and transparency, and it was mentioned by first speaker, by Mr. Kailash, the moral responsibility. So trust and responsibility and transparency is very important. But also we need strong partnership that would help us to create, to develop. I was mentioning that the world is under the big pressure, and the cooperation is not anymore an option to go with. Cooperation, in my opinion, is the only way to go. Thank you.
Mr. Jiri. Then we have our last speaker for the first round, Mr. Igor Lukšić. He was Prime Minister of Montenegro in 2010 to 2012. You have the floor.
Thank you, Dr. Fust. Thank you very much. I think a lot has already been said, and I'll try to take a little bit different angle to this topic, which I believe very much reflects the condition of the world today, and some of the previous speakers have already reflected on that. Zlatko shared statistics, the GDP, the SDG scoreboard. I believe that actually the statistics is even worse than the scoreboard Zlatko shared. But I think it is equally important to understand why we are where we are. Because 11 years back, there was a lot of optimism, the atmosphere of optimism in that room. I remember that, General Assembly clapping a lot to mark adoption of SDGs in UN 2030. But it was not so long before that atmosphere started to turn sour, and clouds were gathering, because it was already pre-pandemic that we started thinking, well, the whole agenda is not really on track. Then COVID came, and then it is now we're talking about emergency, and with 2026. So I think my first note is that probably we should be more concerned about what comes next after 2030, rather than consider acceleration of 2030, because I simply don't think it is realistic. I think we're too far away, and with 4 years to go, it's simply unrealistic. So it is, again, more important, in my view, to think about what comes next. And I'll come back to that. Secondly, I remember it was not so long ago, I was in Sevilla. It was Development Finance big conference, a follow-up to Addis Ababa Action Agenda from 2015. And a lot of pledges were made again. And it was July. In June, some of the wealthiest countries in the world made a decision to increase defense spending from required 2% to 3.5% and 5%. But let's say 3.5, because 5%, that difference between 3.5 and 5 is kind of more a statistical massage, where you put also some very important key infrastructure projects into the function of defense. But nevertheless, but the wealthiest ones can do that only against development budgets. So those pledges, I think, are not really credible. And we're then running rounds, circling around, repeating declarations, but not really, no tangible follow-up. And that all together, I think, creates the atmosphere of failure. So what comes next? And in my thinking, there are 4 plausible scenarios. The first scenario is nothing at all. Nothing at all follows up on SDGs. And that's obviously the bleakest scenario. So if this international rules-based system rupture is really as big as we are afraid it is, then it is maybe also plausible to think that after 2030, there's nothing. Second scenario is possibly to go back to MDGs, or kind of the agenda that continues where SDGs stopped. When you go through the SDG scoreboard, you figure out that progress in health, education, clean energy is something else, but health and education builds on what was achieved by MDGs, and then it continued. To some extent, paradoxically, even COVID helped, at least in terms of health. Third scenario, the most positive one, obviously, is that all of a sudden we wake up one day and say, no, we need, as Gerald told, we need cooperation, and let's try to forge out a new, credible, comprehensive agenda. Let's learn from mistakes. Let's apply a theory of change concept and keep the brand, but figure out how we best move forward to the bright future. That's obviously the third, the most positive scenario. How realistic? I don't know. I'll leave it to everyone to judge. The fourth scenario, which I believe is probably the most realistic right now, is some kind of coalition of the willing. The question is within UN auspices or without UN auspices. Regardless of which direction it takes, some specialized UN agencies should definitely play a very important role to support the coalition of the willing. Who can play part in that endeavor? Probably EU countries or EU in general, I see that. Maybe countries like Canada, maybe some other countries. I'm sure that many African countries would be more than interested in joining, probably a lot of Asian countries and so on. But so without, insisting on having proper global, comprehensive, legitimate, legally binding agenda, maybe something like the coalition of the willing is going to be more realistic. So this is a view from this particular point. It doesn't necessarily mean that anything like this will really materialize, but I just wanted to share some of the thinking as far as what comes next, because I think that's where the focus should start moving to in my view. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your clear naming and framing the whole issue. That brings me to a question to all of you. In your country, in your experience, did we enough to localize this SDGs? That means that they go down to the very bottom of the pyramid, how the specialists call it, and create pressure bottom up. I have in many countries, I looked in still the feeling that it remained at the level of the national administration, or in certain countries at the diplomacy, and then they just recall and collect the statistics. But I couldn't see that there is enough ownership of what it is all about. Would you share that, or do you have better experiences? Please.
Well, though I have been sitting in a very exclusive group appointed by the United Nations Secretary General some years ago, and that is the UN SDG Advocates Group, 17 advocates, and I was one of them and served for several years. But I would confess that we have failed the most marginalized people of the world in all those years. Goal 8.7 has not been achieved, which was supposed to be achieved by 2025. And only 17 to 20% of the indicators could be achieved. That is the international situation, but I will share what you have asked. In India, one experiment which we started some years ago, about 20 years ago in fact, and that is mobilizing the power of community. the potential of community which is dormant. So we worked in, we are working in fact in almost 1,500 communities, a typical Indian village, which has poverty, unemployment, child labor, child marriages, lack of education, lack of basic amenities, water, and so on. And we started with one thing, that we need not to bring outside money too much, but we have to motivate them to take the ownership to change the village and ending all those curses which are existing for ages. And that we call the child-friendly village, and now we call them the compassionate communities. So without confrontation, without going to the court and without fight, we have mobilized children, women, villagers, teachers, and the village institutions, ensuring that no child is left behind. Every child should be free from exploitation and abuse. Every child, irrespective of communities, caste, India is a caste-dominated society, and gender, must be attending a school, and they should remain in a school for whole time. And the quality of education must be improved by way of children's voice. And that's why we have experimented that how these young people, the youth, the children, can come together and form their children's parliament. They learn democracy, the bottom of democracy. They learn leadership, they learn participation, they learn partnership, and they learn speak truth to power. And that has helped in raising their issues, like the girls did not have any toilets, and that was one of the biggest reasons of their dropouts. The quality of education was improved, the retention in schools was improved, and if there are several children who were out of school, they were brought to school by those young people, the youth parliament. And that was supported by some youth groups, women groups, and teachers and other stakeholders. So the community empowerment and community mobilization, unleashing the power of community is one thing where we have achieved all these goals, even without framing them as the sustainable development goals, but these things have been achieved. Second thing is that we have mobilized youth, not only through communities, but we have built social movements against child labor, slavery, for education, long marches, and so on. So institutions were there, institutions are all there, but we see the corruption, not only in India, everywhere in the institutions and the weakening of institutions. What we need is social movements. And the social movement should be led by youth. So we have to invest on youth, and we have compelled the government of India and the state governments to invest more on young people. Not for the social movements, but when youth organize movements, government has to enhance the budgetary allocations for the cause of education and for children.
Learning.
Exactly.
That's
so
the youth.
Bottom up democracy, bottom up leadership and participation. But the most important thing I would sum up here saying that it's very easy to talk. It's important to talk, but easy to talk. What is needed is speak out truth to power.
Yeah.
And that need resilience, that need courage, that need compassion, and that need a sense of urgency, and that needs to feel a feeling that these people are my people, these children are my children, these people are like my family members, and we have to work with them.
I think you are alluding to something extremely important. I learned 20 years ago in one of those village meetings what they explained to me, this proximity of concerns. If people feel concern, then they want to communicate. But a lady told me then, an elderly lady, all these experts, they don't even speak our language. They don't understand our concerns. How should we follow them? Is there not a big problem in this proximity of concerns? Even in my country, if I go to the Alpine region and I talk to the people about the reduction of glaciers and others, they learn now, because they live there, the proximity of concern is given. But when we go higher up in the political pyramid, the proximity of concern is rather related to the media appearance and not so much to what is done for the people and for the cause. But I'm sure in Egypt it is different.
A few points come to mind. First, generalizing makes things a little bit discouraging.
Yeah.
So let's be more granular and take specific examples. In the case of Egypt, we had suffered many years from hepatitis C. It was a very big problem in the population. There was a presidential initiative to free the country from hepatitis C and encourage the production of the vaccines. Today we have a certificate from WHO that we are hepatitis C free as a country, which is a huge achievement, and now we're helping countries in Africa do the same. So this is one example, if we're looking at health, of achieving a goal. So instead of generalizing, this is a specific example. Something else is the importance of having sanitation, electricity, proper roads in villages.
Okay.
So there was an initiative, Decent Life Initiative, a presidential initiative, 4,500 villages where you go and there is public spending at the local level to be able to do this in villages. So that's another example, and it's one of the, it was also recognized by the UN as one of the biggest projects that achieve SDGs at the local level. So that's a second point. The third issue, which something I did before leaving, performance-based budgeting.
Yeah.
This is very, very important. When you're doing performance-based budgeting as a government, you're actually able to put a KPI on the number of beds in hospitals, number of the capacity, the density of schools and so forth. And then the allocation of resources makes more meaning and makes the monitoring from Parliament or from others better. So there's an element of transparency and accountability when it comes to performance-based budgeting. But there's all of this needs money at the end of the day. And that's why when we're talking about macroeconomic stability as a necessary condition, it's necessary because you want, to drive in private sector to be able to shoulder this with the government. There's a business case for each and every project. But this financing needs to be one that doesn't have very big premiums because of risk. And here comes concessional finance and the importance of the financing that comes from the different multilateral development institutions, and try and think about innovative financing mechanisms to draw in private sector, such as debt swaps, such as blended finance tools, and so forth. But this requires commitment from the government, clarity on the projects, and then credibility with respect to your policy agenda to be able to draw in this type of financing. In the case of Egypt, in 6 years, $60 billion of concessional finance, 17 billion to the private sector, 10 billion budget support. Budget support is important because it supports your structural reform agenda. 2 billion of grants for project preparation, grants for capacity building and so forth. So when I say international cooperation is a linchpin to be able to achieve national goals, when we characterize them as global public goods. So yes, absolutely, the text of global public goods is very widespread. There's no exact definition, but we need to take examples which worked, provide them as goalposts and as blueprints of how we can scale them. So this is important. The other thing you had asked me before we ended the first round on financial inclusion. Financial inclusion was also a very important project that was done at the local level to provide the ability for women to access and actually create cooperatives with one another. This enhanced small and medium enterprises among women. So this was an initiative, Central Bank, as well as National Council for Women, and at the governorate level, so a very localized level. We also have a very important social protection program, which is linked to education of girls, Takaful and Karama, which was also part of, started with the World Bank. So we have so many examples. I'm not saying that the agenda is finished. I'm just saying that there are bright spots that need to be pushed domestically and also showcased so that we can, everybody can see that there's actually very important merits in continuing the international cooperation agenda and also trying to, I don't know if the word is correct, accelerate SDGs, but at least move forward. But all of us know that the gaps are there. Regardless of which metric we're going to use, we're not at the end goal yet. And if we add to it the climate challenges, which actually today mean that our needs of energy is much more, whether for production, whether for cooling, whether for the factories, all of this is important. We were president of COP27, our president is here, Minister Samah, and during our COP, we were able to showcase a very important country platform, Nexus of Water, Food and Energy, mobilizing in 2 years $6 billion for the private sector to be able to do renewable projects, wind and solar, including in that innovative tools such as debt swaps, such as investment guarantees from MIGA and others. All of these are very practical examples. So when the panel is talking from policy to implementation, we have practical examples. I just hate it when we generalize too much, because then we get a bit discouraged from some examples that we want to push forward. And then finally, the growth and jobs agenda, extremely important, and I agree with Professor Lin. SDGs, the 17 SDGs can be all put together in growth and jobs. Growth and jobs are needed in advanced economies, middle-income economies, developing economies, low-income countries, but what they need for us to be able to create this growth and jobs, policy predictability, governments that know what they need to do in order to open up for the private sector and define the boundaries between state and private, and also what is very much needed, the infrastructure, digital infrastructure, financial infrastructure, and also the physical infrastructure when it comes to water, when it comes to energy, when it comes to the ability to communicate, to connect between cities, rural areas, between industrial parks and areas where employees exist. So it's integrated development is 2 words, but there's so much depth in each and every word of that. So I can go on for long, but I will stop here. Thank you.
Thank you. We are sure that you do a brilliant job. Listening to you is guaranteeing that you mean it, and that is authenticity. A lot of politicians, I'm so sorry to say, they are not authentic. They want to be something they are not. So we need authentic politicians devoted to their cause, devoted to the job. Congratulations. Another devoted man is Zlatko.
Just as you said, Walter, I mean, politics is too serious to be left to politicians, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, right. I agree with it. Definitely, I do agree. And what we will be in my country will be pushing through the politics, politicians, people from politics, from outside of politics, academic community, NGO, and so on, to push decision makers in direction, as far as my country is, to focus on 3 concrete areas connected to what Igor and Justin were saying. It just happens to be so. Because we as a country, when you look at the SDG report, Bosnia and Herzegovina is top 3rd with the score of SDGs, top 3rd of the countries, which is significantly better than our GDP.
Yeah.
We are not as wealthy as some wealthy countries who can have a luxury to play with SDGs. We are so poor that we have to play so much with SDGs. And we do it very well. That's the reason why we have to focus on the 3 issues connecting what we heard from here. I consider as digitalization, digitalization, and digitalization. Not 3 times digitalization, but I mentioned 3 times. Second thing is green energy and green transition. And the third thing is something which I'll mention 5 times. Education, 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 education. Yeah. That's it. That's what we should focus to move up on all rankings. SDGs, GDP, whatever ranking. Yeah. Those 3 areas are crucial now. That's it.
To create empowerment.
We are ranked, believe it or not, Bosnia and Herzegovina is ranked the same score. We have Montenegro, Bosnia, Brazil, and Cyprus.
Very good.
Exactly the same.
Yeah.
So you don't have to be small or big.
Yeah.
You don't have to be in EU or wherever in order to be good at this. That's
Exactly.
what is encouraging.
You have to be devoted.
You have to be.
And that's what
you have to be
people,
serious.
that's
about
what
it.
people are in Czechia.
No, I really admire what Mrs. Minister said, because it's really impressive. Congratulations. From my perspective, I would say it's a mixed picture. In many aspects, it shifts to the people, to NGOs, to local communities, regional communities, the ownership of the goals. In many aspects, it's still, let's say, in the hands of bureaucrats, and it's going not so well as it could potentially. Of course, being, let's say, middle developed country, we have maybe a more comfortable situation than many others in this respect, but still I see as a non-used opportunity to improve in many aspects which are part of the SDG.
Do you think that journalists need to learn more about SDGs, or are they knowledgeable enough?
I'm not sure. It's in fact, as such, it is not so much the part of the titles of the headlines, but some of the aspects of that are crucial and important, and very politically, let's say, debated. So yeah, I would call mainly because of course, as many European countries, it's the main phenomena is aging of the population. So, for instance, health service, the pensions. Those are typical cases which are very in focus.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Lin.
Okay. I think the issue is not whether it should be bottom up or top down.
Maybe both.
The issue is how to deliver.
Yeah.
Because for those 17 goals, they are desirable. All the people in the bottom, they know that.
Yeah.
You don't have to educate them. That's part of their nature. And from the political leaders, their goal is to stay in power. But what is the best way to stay in power? If you can deliver something who people desire, you will be supported. They will stay in power. But the issue is that very often they do not know how to deliver. And people would not support them because they would not deliver what they want. And that's the reason why we need to learn lessons in the past. Because both the bottom was the top. They should have some incentive that should be compatible. But the actions are not compatible. And we need to learn a lesson from the past and about how come the incentive the same, but the actions are different.
Okay.
And I think that study and a dialogue like this can help us to really understand the way to have a right delivery, and to some extent, that is my first intervention, try to achieve.
Thank you very much. I'm certain that many people will call you and your institute to get shares of your experience.
Most welcome.
Then Mr. Cyril Gaborucci, Moldova.
Thank you, Chairman. As Zlatko was talking about statistics, so I want to say that Moldova is in the first third in terms of implementing the SDGs. And we cannot compete with the size, obviously. Before this panel, my colleague from China was asking about the population of Moldova. So you imagine I was answering that we are around 3 million. So we cannot compete with the size. But what can we do? We can No, not only Moldova, but the small countries.
Yeah.
For sure, they are faster in implementing the reforms. They have less bureaucracy, obviously. They are very open for cooperation. Being small, they would like to cooperate with the bigger countries as well. It's easier for them. I was telling before that how we implemented the interconnection on the energy side. So it's easier for the small country to integrate the regional markets. This country can serve obviously as an innovation platform for implementing the agenda. And there are many other examples where, due to regional cooperation and regional integration, things are moving and process is accelerating. Thank you.
Very important. Thank you. And Mr. Igor Lukšić, you have the last word. So,
Thank you. Well, I think it is important to say that there are many countries, and it is an evidence that they are better off with global development agenda than the other way around.
yeah.
But it is also fair to say that in many cases, low-hanging fruit has been picked up. And when it takes some difficult decisions to have that quantum leap, it was not really the case. Otherwise, within those 1/3 of the targets which are either stalled or going back, we've got poverty, food hunger, and things like that. Yeah? Climate change, absolutely. With countries growingly recalibrating their most immediate goals and so on. So I think on one hand, it is important to say that many countries are better off having the agenda, but at the same time, we cannot be happy with how it is delivered. So this whole, and also some countries, Montenegro included, are also part of the European integration process. And to some extent, those two, or to a large extent, those two overlap. So you can a little bit free ride on SDGs because you anyway have to deal with many things. But for many, many countries, it's not the case. So this guidance of global agenda is really, really crucial.
Thank you very much. With this, we conclude the session. I see that the last minute is running. Thank you very much for your views you brought in. Thank you for your wisdom and your experience. And thank you for your endeavors to continue to work on the issue. Thank you, the audience, for sharing your time. Thank you. All the best.